Welcome to COVID-19 Insights Podcast. How do we survive and thrive in the decade of action? By ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue, or ACS-DSD, which is hosted at the College of Management, Mahidol University.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Suparak Suryanketgao, Assistant Dean for Business and Community Relations and Business Excellence, and a full-time faculty and a researcher at College of Management, Mahidol University from Bangkok, Thailand. Speaking on behalf of the ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue, or ACSDSD. Today, I would like to share with you COVID-19 insights and suggest possible pragmatic how to survive and thrive in the decade of actions towards sustainability. Today, many of us may ask, what are the COVID impacts and how to survive and thrive towards sustainability? So first, let's talk about what the COVID impact at various levels and dimensions. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic crisis has adversely affected the world. Today, we have an astonishing increasing numbers of more than 60 million cases of COVID-19 infections around the world. And since early February 2020, the crisis prompts governments to apply health and safety measures such as lockdowns, shelter in place, and social distancing to prevent populations from the infection. The crisis has really challenged all walks of life and badly hit diverse economic and social dimensions of our nations in every sectors. Several economic and social activities were limited, posing unprecedented challenge to businesses and employment. The impact has yet to be measured deeply as countries, communities, and locals have different shares of the adversities. So you may ask, what are the COVID impacts at the macroeconomic perspective? Various sources predicted a slow global economic and social growth, from a negative to slow GDP growth with millions losses of employment in every continent. The World Bank announced that the COVID-19 pandemic crisis is leading to a global recession. The World Bank also forecasts a 5.2% contraction of the global economy. Even if in one of the fastest growing economies like Southeast Asia, IMF has projected a slower growth than its previous forecast, ranging from negative 6.7 to 2.7. IMF also estimated that Thailand's GDP would unprecedentedly reduce to negative 6.7%, which make the country become one of the hardest hit economies in the region. And while the Bank of Thailand forecasts further decrease of the GDP to negative 8.1% in June. These diverse sources also anticipated that any economic and social recovery would take a longer time than expected, and businesses may not revive until the next year, or later 2022. So, what are the COVID impacts on the social dimension then, particularly on the employment? The COVID-19 crisis has disrupted our normal employment and reduced working hours due to the closure of businesses, corporations, schools, universities, and various institutions. In an announcement of the World Economic Forum, the UN's network agency warned that the COVID-19 could adversely lead to hundreds of millions of people to unemployment. The current G7 jobless totals vary widely, from 30 million in the US to 1.76 million in Japan, and several European governments have moderately increased in unemployment with generous wage subsidies. The latest data from international labor organizations on the labor market impact of the COVID-19 pandemic also reveals a shocking effect on workers' losses of working hours, millions of unemployment, and reduced productivity of hundreds of millions of enterprises worldwide. As job losses escalate, nearly half of the global workforce is still at risk. These impacts and uncertainties could take a heavy toll on people losing livelihoods and mental well-being. Next, what are the COVID impacts in Southeast Asia and ASEAN? In Southeast Asia, all unified nations under a regional corporation of Associations of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN's member countries are being challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as of yesterday, the 28th of July, there are more than 246,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 infection, with over 6,900 deaths in ASEAN. Due to the crisis, ASEAN is facing a major challenge to move sustainable development forward. And prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, ASEAN has long put focuses on the top 5 priority actions towards sustainable development, namely poverty eradication, infrastructure and connectivity, sustainable management of natural resources, sustainable productions and consumptions, and resilience. As addressed in the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and its complementarities roadmap. This ASEAN roadmap is also in line with the UN Global Agenda 2030 and 17 Sustainable Development Goals or the SDGs, forging ahead further possibilities for collaborations and partnership with countries within and outside the region. The COVID-19 put poverty eradication in ASEAN further as one of the most adversely affected areas, not only in terms of the economic dimensions of poverty, but also other dimensions. So the crisis really hit on the resilience. Initially, the issue of resilience might be focusing on more toward the climate change impacts or the economic crisis. But the health crisis that extends to economic and social crisis at this scale is already beyond expectations and has become an intensifying stress tester for the resilience of ASEAN members. Impact on the priority area, especially sustainable management of natural resources and sustainable productions and consumptions, are still ambiguous and lack of systematic empirical evidence. So as a result, my multidisciplinary research team of experts is now working hard on an assessment of COVID-19 impacts with a strategic foresight analysis and identifications of possible recovery responses toward policy implications on sustainable development in ASEAN. My research team is now really undertaking a research project on sustainable development and COVID-19 pandemic in ASEAN. So when the project is at its completion, I hope we will be able to share with you any variable results. Now, let's hear what's the international organization's opinions on the COVID-19 pandemic crisis and possible ways forward. Analysis from international organizations suggests that COVID-19 had far-reaching impacts and covering all aspects of sustainability. The COVID-19 pandemic did not only affect health but also has severe socio-economic impacts globally, regionally, and domestically. Both World Bank and the UN agree that the forecast for the end of extreme poverty has to be revised due to the pandemic. According to the UNDP, the COVID-19 crisis has unfavorably altered a protracted and deeper social and economic stability in all countries, pushing more people into poverty. Particularly countries with weak social and labor protection will likely experience a greater increase in inequality in income and access to opportunities. UNDP's position notes on social and economic impacts of COVID-19 in Asia-Pacific thus calls on countries to avoid returning to the pre-pandemic environmentally unsustainable development path and to capitalize on the opportunity to build a better future. The World Bank also puts forward that we need for urgent actions to lessen the pandemic's health and economic consequences, protect vulnerable populations, and set the stage for a lasting recovery. For emerging markets and developing countries, it is critical to strengthen public health system, address the challenge posed by the informality, and implement reforms that will support strong and sustainable growth once the health crisis abates. Importantly, UN suggests that for the post-pandemic, a new social contract will be needed, featuring greater reduce in inequalities, strengthening resilience to shocks, and protections of human rights. In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic crisis has posed many challenges, but also future opportunities for all of us to learn and grow. Next, let's discuss on how to survive and thrive in decades of actions towards sustainability. One of the alternative ways to tackle COVID-19 crisis is to take an integrative approach of strategic and stakeholder management with a pragmatic view. The first approach focuses on a strategic management for sustainability approach is a strategic approach that has been addressed in my previous research and published in Sustainability Journal. The second maneuver is consistent with the peoples-oriented actions of UN SDGs by considering a stakeholder approach to the COVID-19 crisis. My How to Survive and Thrive in the Decades of Actions Towards Sustainability will take on the strategic management and stakeholder approach. The integrative strategic orientations calls for a reformulation of our COVID strategy toward resilience and sustainability. To move sustainability forward, UN SDGs can provide us an integrative framework for global sustainable development, as well as an enabler to a systematic value creation for all stakeholders and the society in harmony. Despite an understanding about the UN SDG framework, I would like to suggest that it is essential for us to undertake and care for COVID. In brief, the word COVID stands for a strategic formula as an alternative remedy to survive and thrive in the decades of actions towards sustainability. Now let us look at each of the COVID. The first C stands for capacity building for resilience. Capacity building for resilience is a strategic action for the COVID crisis. We need to build and develop necessary skills and competencies through upskilling and reskilling our people to be more agile and resilient to uncertainties. To quickly respond and adapt to changes while withstanding shocks, people will need to be equipped with abilities, capabilities, and capacity through education and training. They will need to reorient their thinking, behaviors, and actions toward good health, well-being, and employability due to job losses, disruptions, and digital transformation. They will also need to be trained to adapt to the new normal businesses and operations during and post-COVID crisis. Therefore, governments, businesses, and associated stakeholders will need to take strategic actions to improve human capacities and human capitals. From a longer-term perspective, all parties and diverse stakeholders will need to strategically plan and holistically implement all economic, environmental, and societal dimensions into meaningful systems to foster resilience and to build adaptability to uncertainties in the environment. Therefore, governments, businesses, and associated stakeholders will need to take strategic actions to improve human capacities and human capitals. From a longer-term perspective, all parties and diverse stakeholders need to strategically plan and to holistically implement all economic, environmental, and societal dimensions into meaningful systems to foster resilience and to build adaptability to uncertainty in the environment. In short, the first C, capacity building for resilience, is linked to the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and its complementarities, roadmaps, and the suggested C, Capacity building for resilience is also consistent to UN SDGs, particularly the SDG 1 to 4 to overall improve qualities of life, education plus SDG 10 to lessen inequality. The next O for opportunity seeking. In every crisis, there are always opportunities. We will need to have a systematic approach to accept what we can do better and seek for solutions to survive and thrive. Quick governmental stimulus and various institutional funding may be supporting sources for prompt job creations for the people in new or local businesses to improve the livelihood and well-being of the impacted communities and lessen suffering in the societies. In fact, a new social contract may be reformed. Sufficiency thinking for sustainable development may be promoted as an alternative solution to the traditional consumerism prior to the COVID crisis. A greater call for right and corrective actions that help us pave a way forward as well as seeks for new chances to rise against all odds. In total, the suggested O for opportunity seeking is in line with various UN SDGs, particularly SDG 1 to 3, 6 to 9, 11 to 17 towards sustainable development. V for vulnerable protection. The COVID-19 put many people in vulnerable positions and difficulties. We may need to identify who are the vulnerable groups such as the sick, the poor, the elder, the young, and the unemployed, and those who may be directly and indirectly affected by the crisis, and to what degree they have been hardly hit. The key question is how we can strategically help and support the vulnerable in the near term, short term, and longer term. Since these similar time spans require different strategies and actions towards sustainable development. Helping protect the vulnerable is key toward achieving UN SDG 1 to 5, 8, 10, 16 to 17. The next is I for integrative partnership and inclusion. Indeed, various stakeholders in the society play different strategic roles and responsibilities to develop and improve sustainability. Doing business as usual will need to be changed and transformed to new normal business behaviors and actions. People within organizations will also need to understand how to be good corporate citizens and extend toward becoming global citizens with concerns for others. Therefore, a radical transformation, strong synergies, and integrated partnership among all stakeholders are much needed today. To strategically integrate holistic systems, processes that strive and thrive for sustainability. We also need to ensure inclusion of all people and leave no one behind. Everyone needs to collaborate and work together. At the end, integrative partnership with a special link to SDG 17 and inclusions are utmost critical to move sustainability forward. Last but not least, D for determination for development. COVID-19 has been a ringing bell to give all of us a wake-up call to think differently and take greater responsibilities to make changes for future transformations and to balance the needs among the paradoxes of environmental protection, social responsibility, and economic performance. Today, what's more important in our life as we live in the world together is a synergetic determination toward genuine sustainable development actions. And actions should go far beyond short-term economic, social, and environmental concerns. We also need to reorient our care toward long-term strategic sustainability thinking and actions from multi-stakeholders perspective and joint perseverance to forge ahead a strategic foresight to support our future generations. With the determinations for development, we can together achieve genuine sustainable development and linking to our ASEAN roadmap and UN SDGs. At the end, the impact of COVID-19 had posed so many challenges to all of us and disrupted our world as never seen before in our lifetime. Hopefully, curable vaccines will soon put the COVID-19 pandemic crisis to an end. Yet, many unsustainable problems are still challenging us ahead, and we will still need to seek for a sustainable solution. Please do not forget that we all are interconnected to the society, our planet, and other larger parts of our ecosystem from all walks of life to our nature and planet. So understanding reciprocity and unified relationships among all will be respected. Changing our strategic and humanistic management paradigms for strategic sustainability and resilience are required at all levels of society than ever before. Furthermore, strategic collaborations and partnership among various stakeholders, including the government, bodies, universities, research institutes, businesses, NGOs, and the civil society are much needed to advance sustainability practice to help create a more sustainable future together. Until we meet again, please take good care with my warmest regard. Dr. Suprak Surenkiat Kaew from College of Management, Mahidol University. Thank you for listening.